I never thought I'd sell myself to save someone else. But when you're 26 and watching your father die in a hospital bed that smells like disinfectant and despair, you realize morality is a luxury you can't afford. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like dying insects. I sat in that plastic chair, the one that had molded itself to my body over 3 months of vigil, holding my father's hand. Thaddeus Rune Corbyn, mechanic, father, dying man. His hands used to fix everything broken. Now, they couldn't even grip a cup of water. Dr. Martinez walked in with that face. You know the one. The face that says, "I'm about to ruin your life, and I've done this 17 times today. Miss Corbyn, I need to be direct with you." Dr. Martinez sat down. That was the first bad sign. Doctors only sit when the news is too heavy to stand with. Without the experimental procedure at Johns Hopkins, your father has 6 months. Maybe less. The words landed like bullets. Clean, precise, fatal. My voice came out steadier than I felt. "How much?" She hesitated. In that pause, I knew the answer would destroy me. $400,000. The number hung in the air like a noose. I had $73 in my checking account, a biochemistry degree I couldn't use because I dropped out of my PhD to care for him. Student loans that laughed at the concept of payment. And hope. Desperate, furious, impossible hope. Welcome back to the channel, and if you're new here, welcome. We tell stories that hit home. Real emotion, our real choices, real consequences. Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. If you're enjoying this, consider subscribing. It means the world. Now, back to the story. 3 days later, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Bill collectors had trained me well. Miss Elaris Jade Corbyn? The voice was female, crisp, expensive. The kind of voice that belonged to someone who'd never worried about money a single day in her life. Yes? My name is Margaret Chen. I'm calling on behalf of Mr. Caspian Wolfe Armitage. My fingers tightened on the phone. Even I knew that name. Caspian Wolfe Armitage, founder of Armitage Biotech, Forbes 30 under 40, the man they called the man who feels nothing. "I think you have the wrong person." "No, Miss Corbyn, we don't." A pause that felt like falling. "Mr. Armitage is aware of your father's condition. He is prepared to cover all medical expenses for the experimental treatment. Completely." The room tilted, my vision blurred. "What?" $400,000 plus additional care, medication, rehabilitation, everything. I couldn't breathe. The universe had closed its fist around my throat. Now it was offering me air. "Why?" I whispered. "Why would he?" In exchange for one thing. There it was. The catch, the price, the cost of miracles. "What?" The pause lasted an eternity. "Marriage." The word hit like a physical blow. My knees almost gave out. "I'm sorry, what?" "Mr. Armitage requires a wife for personal reasons he will explain if you agree to meet. The arrangement would last 1 year. At the end, you would receive a divorce and a settlement of $2 million. Your father's medical care would continue regardless." My mind spun. This was insane. Impossible. A billionaire wanted to marry me, a stranger, a man famous for having no heart. "Your father has 6 months, Miss Corbyn. Mr. Armitage can begin treatment within 48 hours of your agreement. I'll need your answer by tomorrow evening." The call ended. I stood in my tiny apartment, surrounded by past due notices, surrounded by my father's death sentence. I looked at the photo on my desk. Me at 8 years old, covered in grease, learning to change a tire. Dad beside me, laughing. Both of us happy, both of us alive. I picked up my phone, dialed. "I need to meet him first," I said when Margaret Chen answered. "Of course, tomorrow. 2 p.m., Armitage Tower, New York. A car will collect you at noon." Armitage Tower cut into the New York skyline like a blade. Glass and steel. Power made visible. The car that picked me up, a black Mercedes that probably cost more than my entire education, delivered me to a private entrance. Security nodded me through without questions. Elevators that moved too fast. Hallways that smelled like money. Everything was marble and chrome and cold. A door opened. An office that overlooked the city like a kingdom. And then I saw him. Caspian Wolfe Armitage stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows. He turned. Photographs hadn't prepared me. He was tall, 6'3", maybe 6'4". dark hair silvering at the temples despite being only 39. Sharp angles, aristocratic bones, eyes the color of winter oceans, cold, penetrating, empty. Miss Corbyn. His voice matched his appearance, cultured, controlled, devoid of warmth. Thank you for coming. I decided to be direct. I had no time for games. You're offering to save my father's life in exchange for marriage. Why? He gestured to a chair. I sat. He didn't. This is a contractual arrangement, not a romantic relationship. I require a wife for 1 year for personal business reasons. You require substantial financial resources. Our needs align. You could marry anyone. No. He said it like a fact. Most women would expect romance, affection, eventually love. You won't. How do you know? Something flickered in those gray eyes. Not emotion, recognition. Because you're desperate. Desperate people understand transactions. He paused. And because you have nothing to gain from loving me. The statement hung between us. Stark, strange, true. He pulled out a document. It looked like it had been prepared by an army of lawyers. 1 year of marriage, you will live in my home but have your own quarters. No intimate relationship required or expected. You will accompany me to necessary social functions. You will not speak to the press. He paused. In exchange, all medical care for your father, a monthly allowance of $50,000, and at termination, $2 million, and a divorce. $50,000 monthly for existing near him. I stared at the number until it stopped making sense. Why me? Specifically me? He turned back to the window. For a moment, I saw something in his profile, something broken or breaking. Because you understand survival, he said quietly. I don't need you to understand anything else. I thought of my father. Room 407. Machines keeping him alive. 6 months if we did nothing. Maybe less. Where do I sign? Caspian turned back to me. If he felt anything, relief, satisfaction, victory, his face didn't show it. My lawyer will review the contract with you. You have 48 hours to read it, ask questions, and decide. I've already decided. Read it anyway, Miss Corbyn. I don't want you claiming coercion later. I studied him. This man who felt nothing. This stranger offering salvation on a silver platter. Can I ask you something? He nodded once. Have you ever been in love? The question landed like a stone in still water. For just a heartbeat, his mask slipped. Yes, I waited. It taught me that love is the most expensive thing you can purchase, and the only thing with no return on investment. He walked to his desk, pulled out a card, handed it to me. Your father's treatment begins Monday, regardless of your decision. Consider it a down payment on good faith. I stared at the card. At him. I don't understand. You will, or you won't. Either way, your father lives. He turned back to the window, dismissing me. I left Armitage Tower more confused than when I'd arrived. The man who felt nothing had just saved my father's life before I'd even signed the contract. What kind of person does that? What kind of monster? Or what kind of man pretending to be one? The wedding took place in a judge's chambers in Manhattan. No flowers, no music, no guests. Just Caspian, me, 2 lawyers, and signatures on paper. I wore a simple cream dress from Target. He wore a suit that probably cost more than a car. We spoke vows that meant nothing and everything. Signed papers that bound us for 365 days. When the judge said, "You may kiss the bride," Caspian simply said, "That won't be necessary." He shook my hand instead. Firm, professional, cold. It was the loneliest moment of my life. The penthouse he brought me to that evening was in Tribeca. Glass walls, minimalist furniture, art that probably belonged in museums. He showed me to my quarters, a suite larger than my entire apartment. Bedroom, bathroom, sitting room, everything I needed to live, nothing I needed to feel alive. The kitchen is fully stocked. Staff comes Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. If you need anything, there's an intercom system. He paused at the door. My room is on the opposite side of the penthouse. We won't disturb each other. Caspian, he turned. It was the first time I'd used his first name. Thank you for my father. He studied me for a long moment. You don't need to thank me. You're paying for it. He gestured vaguely at the penthouse, at me, at the situation. With your life. For a year. Yes. Something crossed his face. Just a year. He left. I stood in my beautiful prison, wearing a ring that meant nothing, and tried not to cry. At Boston General, my father was being prepared for transport to Johns Hopkins. The experimental treatment would begin in 72 hours. He would live. I told myself that was enough. It had to be. The first week of marriage was an exercise in cohabitation with a ghost. Caspian left before I woke, returned after I slept. We existed in the same space, but different dimensions. I visited Dad every other day. The treatment was working. Slowly, painfully, but working. Color returned to his cheeks. Strength to his grip. You look tired, baby girl, he said during one visit. I'm fine, Dad. This man you married so quickly? Dad, please, just focus on getting better. He studied me with eyes that had seen every moment of my life. You've always been a terrible liar, he said softly. I kissed his forehead and left before he could see me cry. At the penthouse, I began to notice things. Caspian worked constantly. His home office light stayed on until 2, 3, sometimes 4 a.m. I'd wake at strange hours and see the glow under his door. He slept maybe 4 hours a night, ate meals at his desk, protein shakes and salads prepared by staff and left untouched until they went cold. He never watched television, never played music, never did anything that wasn't work. One night, unable to sleep, I made tea. Found him in the living room, standing by the window, staring at the city below. You should be asleep, he said without turning. So should you. I don't sleep well. I joined him at the window. The city stretched out below us. Millions of lights, millions of lives, all of them connected somehow, all of them separate. When was the last time you took a vacation? I asked. I don't take vacations. When was the last time you did something just because you wanted to, not because it advanced a business goal? He turned to look at me then. Really look at me. I don't remember, he said quietly. We stood in silence, two strangers bound by contract and circumstance. Can I ask you something? You'll ask regardless of my permission. I almost smiled. The woman you loved. What happened? His jaw tightened. For a moment, I thought he wouldn't answer. Her name was Vivian Lux Halberg. We met when I was building the company. She was everything I thought I needed. Beautiful, intelligent, ambitious. What happened? I proposed. She said yes. His voice went flat, mechanical. Then I overheard her on the phone with her mother. She didn't love me. And she loved what marriage to me would provide. Security, status, access. My chest tightened. I called off the engagement. She tried to salvage it, claimed I'd misunderstood, that she did love me. He turned back to the window. But I'd heard the truth. She loved my power, not me. I'm sorry. Don't be. It was educational. I learned that love is a transaction. People pretend it's magic, but it's economics. Supply and demand. Cost-benefit analysis. That's the saddest thing I've ever heard. He looked at me again. For just a moment, I saw something human in his eyes. Is it sadder than marrying a stranger to save your father? I had no answer. He left me standing by the window. And I realized something terrifying. I was starting to understand him. The man who built walls so high, he'd forgotten what it felt like to be reached. The man who equated love with loss. And the man who felt nothing because feeling everything had nearly destroyed him. I understood him, and that was dangerous. Week 3 brought an unexpected shift. I'd fallen asleep on the living room couch. A book about biotech innovations lay open on my chest. I'd been reading about Armitage Biotech's latest breakthrough. A treatment for Huntington's disease that could save thousands. I woke to warmth. A blanket, soft, expensive cashmere, draped over me. I sat up, disoriented. The clock read 2:47 a.m. Caspian sat in the chair across from me, laptop balanced on his knees, working. You're still awake, I murmured. You were shivering. I didn't want you to get sick. Such a small thing, such a normal thing. But from a man who felt nothing, it felt monumental. Thank you. He nodded once, kept working. I should have gone to bed. Instead, I curled deeper into the blanket, watched him, his brow furrowed when he concentrated, his jaw clenched when something frustrated him. His fingers flew across the keyboard with unconscious grace. "What are you working on?" I asked. "A proposal for FDA approval on a new Alzheimer's drug." At 3 a.m.? The disease doesn't sleep. Why should I? I studied him, this man who claimed to feel nothing but worked himself to exhaustion trying to cure diseases that destroyed families. "Caspian." He looked up. "When was the last time someone took care of you?" The question caught him off guard. I saw it in the way his fingers stilled on the keyboard. "I don't need anyone to take care of me." "Everyone needs someone." "Do they?" He closed the laptop. "You didn't need anyone. You needed money. I needed a wife. We both got what we needed." That's not the same as needing someone, isn't it? If you're enjoying this story, take a quick minute to hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel grow. Now, let's continue. He stood. I thought he'd leave. Instead, he walked to the window, his constant refuge. "My mother died when I was 8, cancer. My father threw himself into work to cope. I learned early that emotional needs are liabilities. They make you vulnerable, weak, controllable. They make you human. Same thing." I rose, joined him at the window. The city never slept, never stopped, never felt. "I don't think you're as heartless as you pretend to be," I said. He laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Don't romanticize this arrangement, Elaris. I'm not secretly soft. I'm not misunderstood. I'm exactly what I appear to be. A man who covers people with blankets at 3 a.m., a man who doesn't want his contractual wife catching pneumonia and complicating the agreement." But he didn't move away when I stepped closer. And when I said goodnight and walked to my room, he stayed at the window for a long time. The next morning, I emerged from my room to find fresh coffee waiting, my favorite blend, the one I'd mentioned once, in passing, 2 weeks ago. He was already gone to the office, but the coffee was perfect. I stood in the kitchen, holding the warm cup, feeling something shift inside me, something dangerous, something I couldn't afford. The charity gala came 2 days later, my first public appearance as Mrs. Armitage. A gown appeared in my room that afternoon. Midnight blue silk, no note, no explanation, just the dress. It fit perfectly. When I emerged, Caspian was waiting in a tuxedo. He looked even more untouchable than usual. "You look acceptable," he said. I'd learned this was his version of a compliment. "You're a charmer." Was that a smile? Almost. "The goal tonight is simple. We present as a unified couple. You stay by my side. We leave after 2 hours. Don't drink too much champagne." Has anyone ever told you you're romantic? This time, definitely a smile. Small, but there. I've been called many things. Romantic isn't one of them. The gala was at the plaza, old money and new power mixing under crystal chandeliers. People stared when we entered, whispered. The untouchable Caspian Armitage had married. Secretly, suddenly, a nobody from Boston. I felt their judgment like ice water. Caspian's hand found the small of my back. "Breathe. You're worth 10 of anyone in this room." I looked at him startled. He was already scanning the crowd, his mask back in place, but his hand stayed steady against my back. Protective, possessive, real. We made it 30 minutes before she appeared. Vivienne Lux Hellberg. I'd Googled her after Caspian mentioned her. The photos didn't do her justice. She was stunning. White blonde hair, ice blue eyes, a face that belonged on magazine covers. She wore red. Of course she wore red. "Caspian." Her voice was honey and poison. "I heard the most amusing rumor." He turned. I felt his entire body tense. "Vivienne, that you'd married?" Her eyes slid to me like a knife finding flesh. "But that can't be true. You always said marriage was for fools." I changed my mind. "How unlike you." She extended a perfectly manicured hand to me. "Vivienne Hallberg, old friend." "Elaris Corbyn, new wife." Vivienne's smile sharpened. "Corbyn, should I know that name?" "That?" "No reason you would. I'm not famous for anything except being married to him." "How practical." Vivienne turned back to Caspian. "We should catch up. It's been far too long." "I don't think that's necessary." I do. I'll call you. She leaned in, kissed his cheek. Give you time to remember what you gave up. She glided away, leaving the scent of expensive perfume and threat. I'm sorry, Caspian said quietly. For what? For her? She's your ex-fiancée. I knew she existed. Knowing and experiencing are different things. He guided me toward the exit. We're leaving. We haven't been here an hour. I don't care. In the car, he was silent, tense, a wire pulled too tight. She still loves you, I said. She loves the idea of me, the power, the money, not me. How do you know? He turned to me. Something in his eyes made my chest tighten. Because if she loved me, she would have loved me when I had nothing. We rode in silence the rest of the way home. That night, I couldn't sleep. Vivian's perfect face kept appearing in my mind. Perfect dress, perfect certainty. I found Caspian in his office, working as always. Can't sleep? He asked without looking up. Thinking. Dangerous. I sat in the chair across from him. Why did you really marry me? He stopped typing, looked at me. I told you? You told me part of it. What's the rest? He leaned back, studied me, calculating, deciding. My father died 6 months ago. His will had a clause. I inherit full control of the company only if I'm married. Otherwise, it goes to a board of directors, one of whom is Orson Whitaker. My father's oldest friend and silent enemy. Truth, finally. So you needed a wife. I needed someone who wouldn't complicate things, who understood it was business, who wouldn't fall in love and demand more than I could give. And you thought I was that person? I knew you were. Because you married me for your father, not for me, that's honest, pure, uncomplicated. You think love is a complication? I know it is. He turned back to his computer. Love makes people stupid. Weak, it gives others leverage. I can't afford leverage. I stood to leave. She hurt you, Vivian, more than you want to admit. She taught me, there's a difference. Is there? I left him to his work and his walls and his loneliness. Lying in bed, I realized something terrifying. I was starting to care about the man who felt nothing. And that was the most dangerous complication of all. 2 months into the marriage, routines had formed. Days visiting my father, who was responding beautifully to treatment. Evenings navigating life with a husband who was slowly becoming less of a stranger. We had dinner together now, sometimes, when he remembered to eat. We talked about his work, my abandoned PhD, books we'd read, never about feelings. He asked about my father. I asked about his day. We existed in a careful dance of almost friendship. Then Orson Whitaker called. Mrs. Armitage, we haven't been formally introduced. I'm Orson Vale Whitaker, an old friend of Caspian's father. His voice was warm, grandfatherly. Hello, Mr. Whitaker. I was hoping we could meet for coffee. There are some things about Caspian you should know, things he won't tell you. Every instinct screamed danger, but curiosity won. When? We met at a small cafe in the village. Orson was 61, distinguished silver hair, kind eyes that probably hid cruelty. Thank you for meeting me. I wanted to ensure you're being treated well. I am. Good, good. He stirred sugar into coffee he wouldn't drink. I also wanted to give you these. He slid a folder across the table. Inside, documents, emails, board meeting minutes, all dated before our marriage. All discussing the need for Caspian to marry to secure the merger with Halstead Pharmaceuticals. A $10 billion deal required family stability per Halstead's traditional CEO. My hand shook. The merger had nothing to do with his father's will. That clause doesn't exist. I've seen the will. Caspian invented that story. The cafe spun. He needed a wife for the Halstead deal. You were convenient. A nobody with a dying father, perfect leverage. He saves your father, gets a compliant wife, closes the merger, divorces you, and walks away with billions. I couldn't breathe. The documents blurred before my eyes. Board minutes, merger requirements, timelines. All before he'd called me. All before he'd offered salvation. I'm sorry to be the one to tell you, but you deserve to know you're being used. I left the cafe in a daze, Everything felt like a lie. Every dinner, every conversation, every moment of almost warmth, strategy, calculation. I'd married him thinking I understood the transaction. Turns out I'd only understood half of it. I'd been convenient, a means to an end, nothing more. I packed quietly that evening. 2 months of life with Caspian Wolfe Armitage fit into a single suitcase. I called a car service. Not his, my own. I was heading to the door when he appeared. "You're leaving." Not a question. He knew. Somehow, he always knew. "Yes." He looked at the suitcase, at me, his face unreadable. "May I ask why?" "Because I know the truth." "Which truth? There are so many." "About the merger, about why you really needed a wife, about the fact that your father's will had nothing to do with it." Something flickered in his eyes. "Who told you?" "Does it matter?" "Orson." "Does it matter?" I repeated. He stepped closer. "It matters because he lied. Show me the will." "I can't." "Why not?" "Because it's sealed per my father's wishes until I've been married for 1 year. Convenient." "Elaris, don't." My voice cracked. "Don't pretend this was anything more than what it was. A transaction. You saved my father. I gave you legitimacy. That was the deal." "Is your father safe?" The question caught me off guard. "What?" "Your father, is he safe? Healthy?" "Yes." He nodded slowly. "Then the contract fulfilled its purpose." Those words, cold, clinical, exactly what I'd expected from him, cut deeper than Orson's revelations. Because they confirmed my worst fear. I'd meant nothing. A means to an end. "Goodbye, Caspian." I walked to the elevator. He didn't stop me, didn't ask me to stay, didn't fight. Because that's what men who feel nothing do. They let go. In the elevator, descending away from the penthouse and the man who'd become familiar, I cried. Not because he'd used me, but because I'd started to hope he hadn't. The penthouse became a mausoleum after she left. Caspian walked through rooms that suddenly felt massive and empty. Her coffee cup still sat on the counter. Her book about biotech innovation still lay on the couch. Evidence of her existence. Proof she'd been real. He worked 20 hours a day because work was predictable, measurable, controllable, unlike the ache in his chest that refused to fade. His assistant noticed. "Sir, you have the merger celebration tonight. Cancel it." "But the Halstead deal?" I said cancel it. He stood at the window, the place he'd stood with her, talking about nothing and everything, and realized something horrifying. He hadn't protected her for business. He hadn't married her for the merger. He'd married her because she was the first person in years who'd looked at him and seen a human being instead of a bank account. Because she'd challenged him, questioned him, made him think about things beyond quarterly earnings. Because she'd made him laugh. Once, just once. But he'd laughed. And he'd pushed her away because that's what he did. Because loving people gave them power to destroy you. Vivian had taught him that. But Elaris had never wanted power over him. She just wanted her father to live. His phone rang. Margaret Chen. "Sir, Orson Whitaker just tried to call an emergency board meeting." "On what grounds?" "He's claiming the marriage was fraudulent, that Mrs. Armitage has left you." Caspian closed his eyes. Of course, Orson hadn't shown Elaris those documents out of kindness. He'd weaponized her. To destroy Caspian's marriage, to destabilize him emotionally, to create grounds for a board challenge. And Caspian had let him. "Get me the head of security, now." It took 6 hours to find the truth. The documents Orson had shown Elaris were forgeries. Sophisticated, but fake. The merger with Halstead had been secured 3 months before Caspian's marriage. The company didn't require family stability. That was fiction. Orson had fabricated everything, not to destroy Caspian's empire, to take it. Caspian sat in his office, staring at evidence of betrayal, and laughed. A cold, bitter sound. Orson had understood something crucial. You can't destroy a man who feels nothing, but a man who'd started to feel? And that man had vulnerabilities. Days blurred after that. Caspian functioned, barely. Meetings, contracts, decisions. All mechanical, all meaningless. His assistant brought him food. He didn't eat it. His CFO presented quarterly reports. He didn't read them. His head of research announced a breakthrough in the Alzheimer's drug. He felt nothing. The irony wasn't lost on him. The man who felt nothing had become exactly that again. Except now he knew the difference. Feeling nothing by choice was armor. Feeling nothing because the person who made you feel was gone? That was death. Margaret Chen stood in his doorway. "Sir, you have a board meeting in 10 minutes. "I'm not going. Sir, Orson Whitaker has called a vote of no confidence. If you don't attend, let him have it." She stared. "The company? All of it." "Sir, what's the point, Margaret?" He turned to her. She flinched at what she saw in his face. "I built this company to prove I could survive without needing anyone. I won. Congratulations to me. Now it's just a monument to loneliness." "What about the Alzheimer's drug, the Huntington's treatment, the thousands of people depending on your research?" "They'll depend on someone else." Margaret did something she'd never done in 12 years of working for him. She slammed his door. "No." He looked up, startled. "I've watched you work yourself to exhaustion for 12 years. I've seen you sacrifice everything, relationships, health, happiness, for this company, for the research, for the people you're trying to save." She crossed her arms. "You don't get to quit because you're heartbroken." "I'm not. You are. And it's about damn time." Silence. "She made you human. Don't punish the rest of us because she left." Margaret walked out. Caspian sat alone, realizing that the man who felt nothing had become the man who felt everything. And it was unbearable. 3 months after leaving the penthouse, Elaris sat in her father's kitchen in Boston. Thaddeus was home, healthy. The experimental treatment had worked. He'd beaten death. She should be happy. She wasn't. "You've been staring at that coffee for 20 minutes, her father said. "I'm thinking." "About him." She looked up. "How? Baby girl, I've known you for 26 years. I know when you're lying, I know when you're hiding, and I know when you're in love." The word hit like a physical blow. "I'm not." "Yes, you are." She stood, walked to the window. Outside, rain fell. Boston in November, gray and cold and familiar. "Even if I was, it doesn't matter. He doesn't love me. I was a business arrangement, a means to an end." "You sure about that?" She turned. "What?" Thaddeus pulled out his phone, showed her an article. "Billionaire Caspian Armitage steps down as CEO of Armitage Biotech." Her heart stopped. "What?" "Read it." She did. Caspian had resigned, handed control to his executive team, cited personal reasons. The man who worked 20-hour days had quit. The man whose company was his entire identity had walked away. "Why?" she whispered. "Maybe because he realized what he really lost when you left?" She looked at her father, the man she'd saved. The reason she'd married a stranger. "Do you love him?" he asked. She tried to deny it. Tried to explain it away as gratitude, proximity, anything else? Failed. "Yes," she whispered. "Then why are you here?" "Because love isn't enough. He doesn't." "Baby girl, a man doesn't quit his entire life because he feels nothing. He quits because he feels everything and doesn't know what to do with it." She stared at the article. Evidence of emotional catastrophe from a man who claimed to be incapable of emotion. "I don't know if I can trust him." "Trust is earned, but you can't earn it if you're not there." She looked at her father. Alive, healthy, whole. "Go, live your life. I'm not going anywhere." She kissed his cheek, booked a flight to New York, and hoped she wasn't too late. Armitage Tower at night was different. Quieter, less imposing. Security let her up without question. She still had her keycard. He hadn't deactivated it. The penthouse was dark except for one light. His office. She found him there. He looked like a ghost of himself. Thinner, exhausted, broken. He stood when she entered. For a moment, neither spoke. "You came back," he said finally. His voice cracked on the last word. "I heard you quit." "Yes." "Why?" He laughed, a hollow sound. "Because I finally understood what I was running from." Which was? This, feeling, needing, wanting, all the things I spent 20 years convincing myself were weaknesses. She stepped closer. He didn't move away. "Orson lied to you. The documents he showed you were forged. The merger had nothing to do with our marriage. I can prove it. I know. He blinked. You know? I figured it out about 2 weeks ago. His story didn't add up. She paused. But by then, I'd already left, and I didn't know if the truth mattered. Why would it matter? Because I didn't marry you for love, but I stayed because I started to love you. Silence, complete, devastating. I don't understand, he whispered. I know, you think love is a transaction, supply and demand, cost-benefit analysis. She moved closer. But that's not what this is. What is it? Terrifying, irrational, completely illogical, everything you hate. He stared at her like she was speaking a foreign language. I don't know how to do this. Be what you need. I don't know the rules. There are no rules, Caspian. There are always rules. Not for this. He reached out, then stopped, his hand hovering between them. I didn't use you. I mean, I did, initially, for the inheritance clause that actually exists. But then you became real, and I didn't know what to do with that. He finally touched her, just her hand, tentative like she might disappear. I loved you. I just didn't know how to say it. Why me? She asked, the question that had haunted her from the beginning. He laughed softly. Because you never needed me, and that made me want you more than anyone ever has. That doesn't make sense. I know. Nothing about this makes sense. You married me to save your father. I married you to save my company. We should have been a disaster. We were a disaster. We are a disaster. He smiled. A real smile. I'm the first she'd ever seen. But you're my disaster, if you'll have me. She looked at this man. This impossible, broken, brilliant man who'd saved her father and destroyed her peace. Who'd taught her that love wasn't always poetry and flowers. Sometimes love was messy, complicated, built on foundations of desperation and convenience. Two people who'd needed each other for all the wrong reasons and stayed for all the right ones. One condition, she said. Anything. No more contracts. He kissed her then. Finally. A kiss that felt like falling and flying simultaneously. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. I quit the company. I don't know what I'm doing with my life. We'll figure it out. I'm terrible at feelings. I know. I'll probably mess this up. Definitely. He smiled against her lips. Why are you here? Because I love you, even though you're emotionally stunted and workaholic and the most frustrating person I've ever met. Those are my best qualities. I know. They stood there, in the office where he'd spent countless nights hiding from emotion, and chose something different, chose each other, not because they had to, because they wanted to. The board meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. Caspian and Elaris arrived together, hand in hand. Orson Whitaker's face when they walked in was almost worth the previous 3 months of misery. Caspian, I see you've reconciled with your wife. Yes. Caspian pulled out a chair for Elaris, sat beside her. And I believe we have some business to discuss. Indeed. Your resignation, I'm withdrawing it. Silence. On what grounds? On the grounds that my marriage is stronger than ever. My father's will is being unsealed today per the 1-year clause, and your attempt to destabilize my position through fraudulent documents constitutes grounds for removal from the board. Orson's face went white. I don't know what you're talking about. Caspian slid a folder across the table. Forensic analysis of the documents you showed my wife. Forged. We have the metadata, the original files, and testimony from the person you hired to create them. Checkmate? The room erupted. Board members demanded explanations. Lawyers were called. Orson stood. For a moment, his mask slipped. Pure rage. You're weak. Your father would be ashamed. He built this company with steel. You're destroying it with sentiment. Caspian stood, faced him. My father died alone, bitter, near with no one who loved him at his bedside. If that's strength, I'll take weakness. He took Elaris's hand. This meeting is over. Orson, you have 24 hours to resign before I press criminal charges for fraud and corporate espionage. They walked out together. In the elevator, Elaris said, That was terrifying. Welcome to my world. Your old world. What's your new one gonna look like? He thought about it. Smaller, quieter, more time for the research that matters, less time proving myself to people who don't. And? And more time with you. The elevator doors opened to the lobby, to the world outside, to everything that came next. You know what the funny thing is? Elaris said as they walked into the sunlight. What? I married you to save my father, and I married you to save my company. But in the end, she looked at him. He looked at her. They said it together. We saved each other. 1 year later, the wedding was different this time. Flowers, music, guests. Her father walked her down the aisle. Healthy, alive, crying. Caspian stood at the altar in a suit that cost less than his usual ones, looking nervous for the first time in his life. They'd already been married for a year legally. This was different. This was choice. You look beautiful, he whispered when she reached him. You look terrified. I am. What if I mess this up? You will, and I'll forgive you. That's what love is. They spoke new vows, real ones, promised to choose each other every day, to fight fair, to communicate, to never, ever use contracts to define their relationship again. When the officiant said, "You may kiss the bride," Caspian smiled. I think I'll skip that part. Elaris's heart stopped. Then he pulled her close. Just kidding. I've waited a year to do this, right? The kiss was perfect, not because it was theatrical or passionate, but because it was theirs. At the reception, Thaddeus pulled his daughter aside. You happy, baby girl? Ridiculously. Good, you deserve it. Both of you do. Caspian found her an hour later, standing on the balcony, looking at the stars. Hiding from our wedding? He asked. Thinking. About? About how if someone had told me 2 years ago that I'd marry a billionaire to save your life, then fall in love with him, then remarry him for real, I'd have thought they were insane. Are they? Probably. He wrapped his arms around her from behind. Thank you. For what? For seeing past the man who felt nothing, for finding the man underneath. You were always there. You just needed someone to look. They stood in silence, watching the night sky. Two people who'd married for all the wrong reasons and stayed for all the right ones. Caspian. I love you. I know. A pause. I love you too. 6 words. The 6 hardest words he'd ever said, and the 6 truest. Inside the party continued. Their friends, their family, their new beginning. But out here in the quiet, they held each other and understood something fundamental. She'd married him to save her father. He'd married her to save his company. But in the end, they'd saved each other from something worse than death or bankruptcy. They'd saved each other from loneliness. And that made all the difference. That's the end of this story. If it touched you, hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and leave a comment telling me what you thought. What would you have done in Elaris's position? Let's talk about it. More stories like this are coming, so stay connected. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.